Right, so I'll just start by just telling you about a project we've got that started late last year in the Chernobyl exclusion zone, before we go on and have a look at the Arakatil. Okay, so at the end of a talk about Chernobyl, I put a picture up and said, well, that's what the Red Forest looks like now, and I'll explain why. So, in 2015, it was quite a big global news story that there were fires around the exclusion zone. Not in the centre, it was around the edges. It wasn't the actual exclusion zone itself, but it didn't get into the most contaminated parts. We actually lost one of the wildlife trap cameras we had out there. It got melted. And that was big news, big story in the news. But then in July 2016, this happened. So this is actually, I showed you a map of the Red Forest before. So this area is a Red Forest area. It's the most contaminated, probably terrestrial ecosystem on Earth. So where the trees were killed in 1986, 80% of it got burned by a fire. And for whatever reason, that didn't make the news at all. So we found out about it by chance. And asked somebody to go out and take us some photographs. So this is about a week later of what it looked like. So you can see all the surface vegetation's burned, the bottom of the trees are burned, and here I guess it looks like this tree's having a smoke. I guess the ground underneath is still burning and the smoke is coming out through the hole in the tree. Okay, so no longer can you see those trees that were killed in 1986 that were on the ground because they've now all been burned. Alright, so, okay, I'll just show you this one first. Because of the nuclear power plants being in the exclusion zone, there are still air monitors that were operating associated with the plant. So we got some data from one of those, and you can see the peak in cesium, and also even more so in strontium of the period that fire was on in July last year. Right, so we had the opportunity when there is something like this that happens. There's something called an urgency fund we can bid into. It's not very much money, it's only about £60,000, but we can bid into it to do something that, because an event has happened in the world, then you need to do something around it so you don't lose the knowledge that you might get from it. So we've got a project now called Red Fire, which is looking at the consequences of the fire in the Red Forest. Okay, so one of the things we're doing, and that's in collaboration with, since some of you know them, that's in collaboration with Kasparov's group at UAR and UBIT, also at Chernobyl Centre and also a Norwegian University of Life Scientists, Britt Salbu's group. So one of the things we're looking at is, has the fire changed the bioavailability of radionuclides? And you would sort of intuitively guess it must have done. For one thing, there are trees there that had megabecquerels per kilo concentrations in the wood. Well, they're now burnt and they're in ash on the surface, and you would anticipate, for instance, that has a moderately high availability. And also the surface soil burnt, so has that affected the availability in the surface soil of the radionuclides? And has it done anything to the particles that are present in this area? Okay, so we sampled starting last September, and then again this spring and then this September, and we'll look at the change in bioavailability of radionuclides in soils from a Red Forest over time. We won't really get any results from this yet. I thought it might have been interesting to you to let you know what's going on. The other thing we're looking at is so this area has quite a high gradient of radiation over it. There's some areas that are very contaminated, some not so contaminated. Will radiation affect ecosystem recovery? One thing we're looking at is vegetation. So Kath will be out in September looking at vegetation monitoring with botanists from the Ukraine. So to date, what we've done is we have sample sites, and we've got 20 in the Red Forest replicated on trees and then some outside. Where we've been looking at vegetation from last September, which is the earliest we could get there. And then this was the same square in March, so you can see there a little bit of regrowth. And then again, we'll do it in this coming September. Okay, the same there again. In actual fact, on this one, no regrowth at all between September and March. What it looks like is in March, the ground looks a bit flatter. That's basically because they were in snow cover until fairly recently. We're also deploying these things I talked about earlier, these bait lamina sticks, which are a way of measuring soil biological activity. So you put them in the ground and things come and eat or not eat the feed that's in the sticks, and it's a measure of comparative soil biological activity. It so happens that the study we did in April 2016, a lot of those sites were in the Red Forest, so that gave us some baseline data. We can go back to the same sites and use those, and we've expanded the number of sites in the Red Forest, including both burn and unburnt areas. Again, we've done that last September, March, and this September. Okay. The other thing we have, and we're going to do this anyway, we've actually moved some of the wildlife cameras into the Red Forest, and they're running over a period of a year. We are having some problems in that we have 20 on a grid pattern in there. So far 8 have been stolen. It's quite close to where there's a lot of people near the plant. So, these are some of the early ones we brought back from last time we were out. Seeing similar things as we see everywhere else. So we're seeing lynx, we're seeing wolf, we're seeing the deer, we're seeing the elk. Lots of the animals we're seeing elsewhere. What we're also seeing here, which we hadn't seen anywhere else, is actually packs of feral dogs. So these are what we used to be domesticated dogs before the accident, and they're now living in feral packs. I suspect partly the reason there's so many here is that they go and scavenge around the nuclear power plant and people feed them from the canteen and things. But we are seeing this quite regularly, and we're seeing people on their holidays. So these are actually people, they turn themselves stalkers, they go on camping exhibitions across the exclusion zone. Including obviously the most contaminated area. It's illegal, it's known, it goes on. If they're caught, they get deported out. But there's quite a lot of people do it. And there's a network, so they know which abandoned houses they can go and stay in and things while they're walking across. Okay. The other thing we do have here, and we have put out some of the other camera sites, that you can see this here. This is a sound recorder, which allows us to record the soundscape. And then we'll be able to analyse that to look at which species are there, what biodiversity is there in terms of sound, as well as just having the photographs. Again, we're getting these stolen, so I've had a couple of these stolen. Okay. Switch on now if you want. The other thing we have is one of the guys from, so I have a professorship at Salford University as well, and we're working with them on this. One of them's an expert in drones, so he's coming out and flying drones. One, to map vegetation, look at the extent of the burn. You can also do 3D modelling, so we can look at the vegetation height over the zone. By fitting various cameras, you can actually look at, in effect, vegetation health. And we're also going to put a radiation detector on and get a better map of contamination over the zone. Okay, so again, this is the edge of a red forest, and then the nuclear power plant. It is now covered in the new. So the plant doesn't look like it does anymore. It's now under this new arch, and ultimately we'll start dismantling it under the arch. Right. So it was all too big to be in one file, so hopefully this is going to work. So just to give you an idea what it looks like now, if it does work. So this is some of the drone footage. You're going to have to watch it all, I'm afraid. Normally I would start it into it, but I can't do it on these controls. So this is on the edge of the red forest. This is actually pine trees that weren't killed in 1986. But when we went in September 2016, because of a fire, their needles were red, so it looked like it would have been in 1986 in effect. And now, this is now March, April this year, and the trees are in effect now dying. There are no needles on the trees anymore. The bark is falling off at the bottom. You see this here is actually a monument. The Chernobyl area was actually a front line for a lot of World War II. So it's actually a World War II memorial. And there's a lot of trench systems in the area as well. Okay, it's a bit longer when I walk through this. Yeah, so you can see all the bark is now falling off the trees. And eventually these trees will just fall over and die. Well, fall over, they're already dead. Okay, so now we go. So actually this is some of the World War II trench system, you can see. now you should start going up. Okay, you can see there's a few needles left on the trees which are dead, but on the red on the whole, all the needles have now fallen off. As we climb above the top of the trees, then you'll start to see some buildings here. So this is the town of Pripyat. You saw some photographs before lunch. You can see around the zone is quite wet now. There's quite a lot of wetlands. That's increased actually because of how the flow of the river's changed. Okay, you can see a war memorial there again. And as you're spinning around now, you'll start to see some of the burn on the ground where the fire's gone in, and we'll start to see the area that was killed in 1986. Okay. Yeah, so we wear paper suits and rubber boots and masks when we're working in here, and partially because of all the ash at the moment. If you remember, I said the Americans had done that experiment where they've introduced small mammals into a zone. They would have used this. So this is actually an experimental enclosure that was built in the Red Forest in the 90s for conducting experiments with animals in. From the outside it looks like a massive great swimming pool. So now you're getting over the area where the pine trees were killed in 1986, which had birch regrowth. You're also now, you can see all the burn on the ground from a 2016 fire. Actually just there is the bottom of the power plant. Again, quite a lot of wetland in the area. And as you're spinning over here, you're now looking at the far edge of a red forest. So you've now seen from one side of a red forest to the other. Which being all of the regenerated birch, well now it's burn, has grown since the accident in 86. Right, so that's it really on Chernobyl. I just thought you might want to see that as an end to the talk I gave before. Obviously, results coming out that might have some relevance for you here in Japan, being a large part of your land is forest. The effects of forest fire on contaminated land is of interest to Japan. If you are interested anymore, there are a couple of websites. So there's the Tree Project, which is mostly what I talked about before lunch, has a website, and Red Fire, which is the one about the Red Forest. There's a book Jim Smith and I wrote a few years ago. It's got quite good reviews. It was a bit heavy to bring here, but we have also developed a virtual reality tour of Chernobyl, if you like. So these are Oculus Rift headsets. And then you see a map of Chernobyl, and then you can go to various places and you can watch some of its movies, and you can walk around. We've used 360-degree cameras as well, so you can turn around and look around and things like that. Okay, and that actually has had quite a good public engagement thing in the UK. So last year, as a consequence of that, we actually won an award as Best Research Project. Okay, so thank you on that. Any questions now more about the Chernobyl side? And if not,